Hello guys, support us and subscribe to our channel, give likes and write comments. Today we will read
The Road to the Beloved.
Well, let's get started.
And it all started on a cold, sad November. There was no one she knew online, so she decided to find a new companion. Jim, he immediately supported the game, called her a fairy dot. Funny. They chatted for a long time, and he didn't know her real name. She was even more turned on by this mystery. They talked about absolutely everything. Dreams mingled with reality, and one day she realized that she probably wanted to meet this man for real, though she hadn't allowed herself to before. A tumultuous New Year's Eve passed. Then a vacation. She was exhausted from communicating with him. She could not stand it. She ran to work, just to have a few words with her prince. Their relationship was not overshadowed by the usual mundane problems. Everything was like in a real fairy tale. A month, another month of correspondence. She already knew a lot about him. He knew everything about her. It was a tangled love story. She had been alone for 2 years, or rather not alone, had a wonderful little girl by her side, but there was no man, and she was used to thinking of him as her secret. There were many men around all the time, but now there was a prince. And when he once told her about the butterflies in the shower, she just cried. And only now she realized how lonely she was. She so wanted just for a minute to snuggle up to him, to feel the reality of his virtual prince. More and more often in their conversation, thoughts of meeting began to flicker. When the snow melts, and then. Logic and basic etiquette dictated that he go to her first. But something was scaring her, stopping her from an open invitation. So, in mid-April, after studying a map of America's highways, she hit the road. It was a long drive, from Los Angeles to his distant city of Boston. He said the snow had almost melted there, too. It was a confusing love story. She had hardly slept in the last few days. The excitement was taking its toll. There were many important things to do, thorough preparations for the road, getting the car ready, and herself, of course. So many years without a date, and now to go thousands of miles away, to her prince. These thoughts evoked a slight smile. About what would happen next she did not even think, or rather, did not want to think, being afraid that she would just get cold feet, and would not go anywhere. And so I wanted to. Everything is set for the morning, self-paid leave, parents' blessing, goodbye to my daughter, lots of coffee for the trip. That's it, she's going. Favorite music, spring sunshine, a good road, the mood is beautiful as love. My fantasy draws incredible pictures that make my cheeks flush, giggles softly, purrs songs under my nose, and unnoticeably speeds up. Stopping for refueling, she calls her parents to tell them everything is fine, listens to her father's admonitions about the car, and continues on her way. I decide to spend the night in a comfortable hotel and hit the road early in the morning to get to my prince sooner. I glimpsed over the little towns. The road was gorgeous, and then Memphis came along almost 2,700 kilometers behind us. Yes, I was tired from the habit. I needed to sleep for a few hours, and then on to Philadelphia, and then Boston. Marking the route on the map, I thought, here's another 300 miles closer, and quietly smiled to her thoughts. Judging by the map, there were about 100 kilometers to go. How she worried! But it was too late to retreat. She stopped, stretched out, tired as if there was no fatigue, fixed her makeup, drank her coffee, and decided to call her prince. Now that was a surprise. Of course, she was silly not to have called him once in the entire trip. He was sincerely worried about her, but it was a real gift for him. She agreed that he would meet her at the entrance to the city. Her hands trembled and her breathing quickened. How she feared he would not like her. She parked carefully, just clutching the steering wheel, afraid to get out of the car. Suddenly, it was overcast. A spring day was suddenly turning into a deep, gloomy autumn. Not surprising, though, for an early spring. In her mind she was already there, with him. That's why she was unconsciously speeding up her car, too. Suddenly the car ahead of her braked sharply. Its speed caused it to swerve. She hit the brakes sharply, too. A squeal, a deafening squeal of brakes. It just burst into her brain, into her thoughts. To avoid collision with the stopped car, she sharply turns the steering wheel to the left. The car was being swept off the road by inertia. Lumps of mud hit the windshield with a heavy thud, like a splash, breaking it. She hears her daughter's voice somewhere, and in the middle of the mud she sees roses. That's love. Silence, some strange, crushing silence. It is frightening, an unknown, a heavy expectation. And then in that ringing silence she heard a knock. It was Love. He came over, quietly drumming his fingers on the glass. She shuddered in surprise. She realized she'd just fallen asleep and had a nightmare. She looked up at him, a sweet, kind, peaceful smile. He opened the door, took her by the hand, led her out of the car, looked into her eyes, and said softly, "Hello, fairy." How funny after all. Standing in front of her is a man outwardly a complete stranger. Strange facial features, unfamiliar scent of expensive perfume, unfamiliar intonation of voice. But at the same time, she knows that he irons his own shirts. He prefers not quite naked women in sex. Apparently, that's the beauty of online dating. It's love, a moment of confusion, as if getting used to each other. She looks into his eyes spellbound, a shiver of fear and uncertainty gradually passes. She just dissolves in the tenderness of his gaze. Then she realizes that what she has long sought has finally happened. Here he is, her virtual unreal prince. How is your trip? Thank you, I'm great. And a few more phrases about nothing. She knew that she was tired and hungry, but she could not admit it. He did not know what to offer her, to go straight to him or stay in a hotel. After all, he did not know her either, afraid to offend any of these proposals. I can show you the city, and we can have lunch on the way, right? Come on, it would be a pleasure. The city turned out to be very beautiful, somehow young in this spring rays. Even the rare puddles did not spoil its attractiveness. He told her interesting stories about the city. His jokes helped her shake off her travel fatigue, and she began to slowly become convinced that the prince was real. Here is his favorite cafe. This is where they will eat. The moaning of her hungry stomach seemed to just drown out her own voice. At dinner, a glass of light wine finally relaxed her, and she herself offered to show, if possible, his nest. He, of course, agreed, glad that the fairy didn't turn out to be a stiff, uptight maiden either. This was his home, this was where her prince lived. They say that the things in a house can tell a great deal about its owner even at first glance. He seemed to her to be a very punctual and neat man. "I'll make us some coffee, and you make yourself comfortable." She was happy to settle down in the large, soft armchair. She looked around the cozy room again, smiled at her thoughts, and in a second fell asleep in a calm, serene sleep. Of this love story when she woke up, it was spring dusk outside the window. She was carefully wrapped in a soft blanket. The room was quiet. She stretched herself sweetly, not really knowing where she was yet. Then, gradually returning from sleep to reality, she realized that there was someone else in the apartment. Looking closely, she saw light coming in through the crack under the door. I got up and tiptoed toward the light. In the kitchen, purring to herself, her prince was working on dinner. She entered quietly, and for a moment just stared at him, admiring his virtuosity in the midst of the kitchen. He just felt her presence, looked back. There's that soft, gentle smile again. "It seems that the coffee is already 3 times cold. I thought that when you wake up, you'll want to eat." His concern so touching, so sincere, a slight embarrassment at these words, all this so touched her heart that she, obeying her instinct, went up and kissed him herself. A kiss, at first light, as if exploring, then increasingly passionate, which made her just tremble in his hands, her breath froze, her head turned dizzy. His lips, so passionate, so inviting. She just trembled her whole body from the heat that came over her. He, feeling the quiver of her so desired body, brought her even closer to him, and there was no power in the world that could keep them apart at that moment. Some time passed and they found themselves already in the bedroom, frantically undressing each other, saying something, whispering something to each other. That night they just reveled in each other, languishing in each other's arms, giving themselves to each other without a rest. The mad entanglement of their bodies was like a strange, passionate dance, in which there are only two. She gave herself unashamedly to his tender, inviting lips, soft, skillful hands. He whispered in her ear, "You are an amazing woman. You divine fairy." These words turned everything over in my soul, stirred up with renewed vigor. A long time had passed, it seemed that dawn was coming. She just woke up, whether from sleep or from oblivion. The prince was sleeping quietly beside her. She looked at him, even in his sleep he was smiling. She kissed him softly, as if to thank him for his recent pleasure, and quietly slipped out of his embrace, went into the kitchen. She made herself a coffee, smoked a cigarette, looked at the prince's city in the light of dawn. Some kind of madness was going on in her soul, everything was turned upside down, she could not collect her thoughts. And then she remembered her favorite heroine, Scarlet, In such cases, she said, I'll think about it tomorrow. That's how the fairy stood at the open window, with a mug of hot coffee, looking at the waking city, enjoying the fresh, spring breeze that had so unexpectedly entered his life, and did not think about anything. When it got a little chilly, she shivered from the morning freshness. She smoked the window and quietly snuck back into the bedroom. The prince was still sleeping peacefully, also smiling at something unknown. She quietly slipped under his blanket. His warm, so desired body was relaxed, his face calm. She just looked at him for a while, then, hugging him softly, ran her fingers over his slender, beautiful figure. He was still asleep, but his body responded vividly to her touch. At that moment she realized that the prince was awake, but without opening his eyes he whispered, "I have long dreamed of such an awakening." His eyes, whether from excitement or from the morning sun, became simply blue. She sincerely admired this change, did not take her eyes off, and then got up and walked over to the piano. Opening the lid, she gently stroked the keys, and looked back. "Remember I promised you I'd play Vivaldi when we met? Well, I haven't had an occasion for a long time, but today suddenly I wanted to again." She sat down near the piano, and her fingers obediently ran over the keys, at first gently, barely touching, then increasingly confidently. The melody became brighter and richer. The next chord sounded like a shriek, and then the melody began again. Quietly, melodiously, it was as if the music reflected everything that was going on in her soul at that moment. He came up behind her, put his hands on her shoulders, and just enjoyed the music, the presence of the fairy, the aroma of her so desired body. When the music ended, he kissed her hair softly, for a few moments without disturbing the silence and the wonderful atmosphere that the music had created. He lifted her in his arms, looked into her huge eyes, held her close to him, and said softly, "How long I've been looking for you, my love."
Thank you! Learn English with us easily and fun. Support us and subscribe to our channel. Give likes and write comments. Watch new videos on our channel every day. See you soon and bye-bye.